The wrestling world got hit with a thunderbolt in 2025 when some of the biggest names who ever stepped foot in a WWE ring found themselves facing judges instead of opponents. These are the men who defined an era, the legends who made millions of fans jump out of their seats, and now their mugshots are spreading across the internet faster than their greatest championship victories ever did. What happened to these icons is stranger than any storyline Vince McMahon could have dreamed up, and if you think you know these wrestlers, you're about to discover sides of them that never made it to Monday Night Raw. Before we dive into these shocking revelations, make sure you hit that subscribe button because we're bringing you the untold stories that the mainstream media won't touch. The name Jimmy Superfly Snuka once meant death from above, a flying Fijian warrior who changed professional wrestling forever with his high-flying style. His leap from the top of the steel cage at Madison Square Garden became the stuff of legend, replayed thousands of times and imitated by every wrestler who came after him. But behind the face paint and the savage persona was a man carrying a dark secret for over 3 decades. In 1983, his girlfriend Nancy Argentino was found dead in a hotel room in Allentown, Pennsylvania, with severe skull injuries and more than 24 cuts and bruises covering her body. For years, the case went cold, dismissed as an accidental fall despite the medical examiner's findings that her injuries were consistent with being assaulted and then being struck with a stationary object. Snuka claimed she slipped and fell, hitting her head, but the evidence told a completely different story that authorities initially chose to ignore. Fast forward to 2015, and new technology allowed investigators to re-examine the case with fresh eyes. Witnesses who had been too scared to come forward decades earlier finally spoke up, describing a volatile relationship filled with violence. One witness reported hearing a woman screaming and a man shouting on the night of Nancy's death. Hotel staff recalled seeing Snuka standing over her body, his demeanor cold and detached. The case was reopened, and in 2015, Snuka was charged with third-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. The trial became a media circus as fans struggled to reconcile the beloved WWE Hall of Famer with the accused murderer sitting in court. His defense team argued he was suffering from dementia and stomach cancer, conditions that made him unfit to stand trial. The judge agreed in 2017, dismissing the case just months before Snuka died at age 73. He never faced a jury for Nancy's death, never answered fully for what happened that night in 1983, and the wrestling world was left wondering how someone could be both a hero in the ring and a monster outside of it. Marty Jannetty was one half of the legendary Rockers tag team alongside Shawn Michaels, delivering some of the most electrifying matches of the late 1980s and early 1990s. While Shawn went on to become the Heartbreak Kid and a multiple-time world champion, Marty's career took a nosedive into obscurity punctuated by personal demons and erratic behavior. His social media posts over the years became increasingly bizarre, but nothing prepared fans for what he wrote in 2020. In a Facebook post that sent shockwaves through the wrestling community, Jannetty appeared to confess to killing a man and throwing his body in a river back in the 1970s. He claimed he was 13 years old when a man at a bowling alley in Columbus, Georgia tried to assault him, and he fought back, allegedly ending the man's life. The post was deleted almost immediately, but screenshots had already spread across the internet like wildfire. Law enforcement in Georgia took notice and announced they were investigating the claims, trying to determine if there was any truth to what seemed like a drug-fueled rant or a desperate cry for attention. Jannetty later tried to walk back the confession, claiming he was talking about a storyline or that he was hacked, but the damage was done. Police confirmed they were looking into missing persons cases from that time period in Columbus. The wrestling world watched in horror as a man who once thrilled audiences with perfectly executed dropkicks and superkicks now faced potential murder charges for a crime allegedly committed nearly 50 years ago. His interviews became even more erratic, with Jannetty giving conflicting accounts of what happened, sometimes saying the incident was real, other times claiming it was all a work, using wrestling terminology to describe what might have been an actual homicide. As of 2025, the investigation remains open, and Jannetty continues to live in a haze of controversy, his legacy forever tainted by words he typed on a keyboard one night that he can never take back. Kevin Nash, the 7-foot giant who ruled WWE as Diesel and later became a founding member of the New World Order in WCW, found himself in legal trouble in 2024 that carried into 2025. Known for his cool demeanor and his ability to talk his way out of almost any situation, Nash met his match when he was arrested on Christmas Eve 2024 for battery charges following an altercation with his son Tristan. The incident occurred at the Nash family home in Florida, where an argument between father and son escalated into a physical confrontation. According to police reports, Nash allegedly grabbed his son by the throat and pulled his hair during a heated dispute, leaving visible marks. Tristan, who had struggled with mental health issues and had been the subject of his father's emotional social media posts in the past, called the authorities, leading to Nash's arrest. The mugshot of Big Daddy Cool behind bars spread across wrestling websites within hours, and fans couldn't believe that one of the most successful and seemingly level-headed wrestlers of all time was facing domestic battery charges. Nash posted bond and was released, but the legal proceedings stretched into 2025 as prosecutors built their case. The wrestling legend maintained that the incident was blown out of proportion, that he was trying to de-escalate a situation with his troubled son, but the evidence and witness statements painted a picture of a man who lost control. In March 2025, Nash accepted a plea deal that resulted in probation, mandatory anger management classes, and a restraining order preventing him from contacting his son for a specified period. The sentence was relatively light, but the damage to Nash's reputation was severe. He had spent years cultivating an image as the smartest guy in the business, the thinker who outsmarted promoters and maximized his earnings, but now he was just another wrestler with a mugshot and a story about things getting out of hand at home. Tammy Sytch, better known as Sunny, was WWE's first true diva and one of the most downloaded women on the internet during the 1990s. She managed some of the biggest tag teams in WWE history and was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2011, a recognition of her impact on the business. But her post-wrestling life became a cautionary tale of addiction, bad decisions, and multiple arrests that culminated in tragedy in 2022 that led to her sentencing in 2023 with continued legal issues into 2025. In March 2022, Sytch was driving under the influence in Florida when she crashed into another vehicle at high speed, killing 75-year-old Julian Lasseter instantly. She was driving with a suspended license, her 8th DUI offense, and toxicology reports showed she had a blood alcohol level more than 3 times the legal limit. The crash was so violent that Lasseter's car burst into flames, and witnesses described the scene of horror as emergency responders worked to extract his body. Sytch showed little remorse in the immediate aftermath, and her behavior in court during preliminary hearings shocked observers as she smirked and seemed detached from the gravity of what she had done. In November 2023, she was sentenced to 17 years in prison for DUI manslaughter, vehicular homicide, and driving with a suspended license. The judge called her a danger to society and noted her complete lack of rehabilitation despite numerous chances to get her life together. Throughout 2024 and into 2025, Sytch has filed multiple appeals, claiming ineffective counsel and excessive sentencing, but each has been denied. Her once beautiful face, which graced magazine covers and WWE programming for years, is now seen only in prison photos that occasionally surface online. Fellow wrestlers who once called her a friend have distanced themselves, and the wrestling community has largely written her off as someone who squandered every opportunity and took an innocent life in the process. Her story is a tragedy not just for Julian Lasseter and his family, but for what happens when addiction goes unchecked and enablers refuse to force someone to face consequences until it's too late. New Jack was never sentenced in 2025 because he died in 2021, but his legacy of violence both in and out of the ring continued to generate controversy and legal discussions years after his death. Known as one of the most legitimately dangerous men in professional wrestling, New Jack admitted in multiple interviews to stabbing opponents for real during matches and to committing crimes outside the ring that would have landed most people in prison for life. He bragged about being involved in street-level drug dealing and violence during his younger years, and he wore his criminal past like a badge of honor. During a match in 2004, he threw an opponent off a scaffold, causing serious injuries, and he faced attempted murder charges that were eventually dropped. His shoot interviews became legendary for their brutality and honesty, with New Jack confessing to things that made even hardcore wrestling fans uncomfortable. The wrestling world has spent years debating whether New Jack should be celebrated as an authentic outlaw or condemned as a psychopath who used wrestling as an excuse to hurt people. No legal proceedings happened in 2025 related to him directly, but discussions about his career and whether promoters who booked him should face liability continued in legal circles and among wrestling historians. His death at age 58 from a heart attack ended any chance of him facing new charges for old crimes, but the conversations about accountability in wrestling and what happens when someone crosses the line from performer to predator remain relevant. New Jack represents the darkest corner of professional wrestling, where the line between character and reality disappeared completely, and fans still argue about whether he was a genius who understood the business or simply a violent criminal who found a legal outlet for his aggression. The stories of these legends serve as stark reminders that the men and women we cheer in arenas and watch on television are real people with real flaws, capable of both greatness and terrible choices. The scripted nature of professional wrestling creates a distance between performer and audience, making it easy to forget that these larger-than-life characters go home to real lives with real consequences. When those consequences involve judges and jail cells instead of championships and celebrations, the industry is forced to reckon with its past and its tendency to look the other way when stars misbehave. The year 2025 has brought renewed attention to these cases, with documentary crews and investigative journalists digging deeper into the criminal histories of wrestlers who once seemed untouchable. What they're finding is a pattern of abuse, addiction, and violence that was often ignored or covered up by promoters more concerned with ticket sales than with the safety and well-being of everyone around these performers. The reckoning extends beyond individual cases to questions about what wrestling owes to the families of victims, to the wrestlers themselves who spiral into addiction and crime, and to fans who continue to support an industry that has historically protected its own at the expense of justice. These legends sentenced or investigated in 2025 are not isolated incidents but part of a larger story about fame, power, and the price of living a life where the lines between performance and reality blur until they disappear completely. Their falls from grace are complete, their legacies forever complicated by the crimes they committed or were accused of committing, and the wrestling world moves forward carrying the weight of these stories as warnings of what can happen when accountability is delayed or denied. If you've made it this far, you now know the full truth about these WWE legends and their legal troubles that define 2025. These aren't storylines or kayfabe, but real consequences for real actions that shattered the images we held of these performers. Make sure you're subscribed to stay updated on more wrestling stories that go beyond the ring and reveal the real people behind the characters we grew up watching.